Soy Joel Francia, trainer profesional de Scrum.org, y me acompaña Kurt Bittner, encargado de las soluciones empresariales en Scrum.org. Para empezar, le voy a dar la bienvenida a Kurt. Kurt, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Today, hoy vamos a hablar acerca de métricas ágiles, de cómo EBM puede ayudar a definir objetivos basados en valor y métricas que ayuden a mejorar la autogestión de los equipos. Bueno, quisiera hacer la introducción de un libro que Kurt acaba de lanzar junto con Patricia Kohn, Todd Miller y Ryan Ripley, que son trainers de Scrum.org. Un libro dedicado a discutir y desarrollar el marco EBM de Scrum.org. Bueno, yo tengo más de 25 años en el mundo de TI y soy trainer de Scrum.org desde hace 14 años. Bien, Kurt.
Yeah, hi. If you could start with the other diagram, then I'll come back to this one.
Okay.
Yes, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to talk about EBM today. I thought I'd introduce you to EBM with a couple of really simple slides, and you've done some translations. That's excellent. So the basic idea behind EBM is that organizations struggle. Really, it started from an idea that organizations struggle with what are they trying to achieve with agility? And so what we found is that organizations actually have a hard time forming goals in general. They're okay with goals that maybe are relatively short-term in nature and tend to be oriented towards producing things or telling people what to do. But from a strategic standpoint, goals are usually better focused on things like improving customer outcomes. And so we've got goals in EBM at three different levels. We've got strategic goals, which tend to be long-term, multi-year, perhaps 3 to 5 years out. Intermediate goals that tend to be something more in the neighborhood of 6 to 12 months, and short-term goals, which align pretty well with Scrum sprint goals. So a couple of weeks in duration, maybe up to a month. What the reason why people choose to use agility or seek agility is because we feel like they're seeking towards some kind of goal. They want to achieve something in a longer term. And with Scrum, you proceed through a series of sprints, and you've got these sprint goals. But for a team or a product owner, maybe even an organization, what are they trying to achieve at this top level? And it's seeking towards those goals through a series of sprints. So the sprint goals would then be seeking towards an intermediate goal. And then over time, those intermediate goals evolve and improve towards achieving a strategic goal. And if you notice in the diagram here, that goal is sort of wandering around a little bit. And the reason for that is that we often get feedback that tells us that our goals really aren't the right goals. You might think that customers want one thing, you get some feedback, you deliver a product increment, you get some feedback that says, that wasn't really quite what they wanted, but they really like something else that you did, or they tell you that, yes, we wanted to achieve something different with the product. And so these sprint goals obviously are fixed for the length of the sprint, but the intermediate goals and the strategic goals will wander around a little bit. And so you see in the upper left-hand corner, there's this idea of this experiment loop. And you can think of a sprint as a kind of experiment loop. You form you form a sprint goal, you determine what kind of work you're going to do during the sprint to achieve that goal, you deliver the product increment, you ideally measure the result of that product increment, and then you inspect and adapt based on the information that you got. So we can generalize that to really any kind of agile process or any kind of empirical process, that you form hypotheses, you determine how you're going to run the experiment, you actually run the experiment, and then you gather feedback and then inspect and adapt. So that experiment loop, that can run at a Scrum team level, but it can run at the whole organization level. Could run at a product level. This is the basic idea behind EBM, is to help organizations seek towards their goals using empiricism. So if we look at the next, or the previous slide, I guess you had it, we try to put some structure around what kinds of things should the team be measuring to help them seek toward those goals. And so we have this idea of key value areas. And the key value areas, we've got a diagram here, Joel, if you could change that. Yeah.
If you allow me to translate.
Yeah.
Please.
No. Oh, yeah, if you want to translate, sorry, I got that. So go ahead.
Bien, Kurt nos dice que la idea principal de EBM la introduce con estos dos slides. La idea principal de EBM es que las empresas tratan de lograr la agilidad, se pelean por lograr la agilidad, y que probablemente tienen problemas en definir los objetivos que llevan a adoptar la agilidad. Estas empresas algunas veces definen objetivos orientados a producir salidas, cosas que producen, outputs, o decirles a las personas qué hacer, objetivos que le dicen a las personas qué deben hacer, qué deben producir, ¿ya? Pero tienen problemas en producir objetivos que ayuden a definir valor a entregar a los clientes. En EBM tenemos tres capas de objetivos: estratégicos, a largo plazo, intermedios, mediano plazo y tácticos, que probablemente pueden ser asociados algunos al Sprint Goal y son de algunas semanas. En general, creemos que las empresas buscan lograr la agilidad porque quieren lograr algún tipo de objetivo a largo plazo. Estos objetivos se van a lograr con los sprints. Los objetivos del sprint colaboran, ayudan a los objetivos intermedios, y los objetivos intermedios, cuando se logran, ayudan a lograr los objetivos estratégicos. EBM habla entonces de estos tres objetivos, ¿no? De estos tres objetivos: estratégicos, intermedios y tácticos. Con el feedback de los clientes, nosotros en cada sprint sabemos si realmente los objetivos son válidos o si estamos entregando valor de acuerdo a los objetivos o avanzando hacia esos objetivos. O es que los clientes quieren lograr algo diferente con el producto. El sprint es un tipo de experimento donde se forma un sprint goal y se define el trabajo para lograr ese objetivo con el incremento del producto, y idealmente se mide el resultado en ese sprint y se inspecciona y se adapta en función de ese resultado hacia el objetivo intermedio y hacia el objetivo estratégico. Esto es un proceso empírico. En este proceso empírico se forma una hipótesis, se ejecuta un experimento y entonces nos adaptamos en función del resultado de la inspección. La idea básica de EBM es lograr los objetivos que la empresa plantea al hacer la transformación ágil usando el empirismo. Y en EBM intentamos crear un conjunto de estructuras de métricas que ayuden a los equipos a lograr acercarse a estos objetivos usando el empirismo. Ok, ahí estamos, Kurt.
Yeah, and want to go back to the KVA slide?
Ahí.
Yeah, there we go. So the idea of goals is really easy to understand. I think it aligns pretty intuitively with most of what we have to do in life. What we try to do with EBM is to add some, you can think of these different key value areas as almost like lenses that help you focus on different parts of the problem. And so we've got two kinds of key value areas that focus on market value on the top part of the slide. And then we've got two key value areas that focus on organizational capability and delivering that market value. So to start at the top on the upper left-hand side, we have this concept called unrealized value. And unrealized value is basically your business opportunity. It's It reflects a gap that your customers experience between what they can do today and what they would like to do, what they would like to be able to do in the future at some point. So that gap, we call that a satisfaction gap, is something that over time you hope to close. You hope to make that smaller. And you do that by delivering product increments in Scrum terms that have value, that reflect some sort of current value on the right-hand side. So that over time, you'd be delivering current value, and you'd see that left-hand side part, the unrealized value going down. Unrealized value becomes important as well when you start looking at different opportunities. And so you could compare different products and say, which product should we be working on more? Should we be, well, you'd like to be working on the one with the greatest unrealized value or the greatest satisfaction gap. So that helps you solve portfolio level problems. Now, on the bottom part of the diagram, these two different ideas of ability to innovate and time to market. Time to market is probably the easiest to understand because it's simply how long does it take us to go from an idea to when we can actually measure the benefit or no benefit of delivering that idea. So it's essentially a measure of cycle time. The ability to innovate is focused on how effective you are at delivering value. So let's say that you have a cycle time, time to market of 2 weeks, aligns with mostly what a sprint length would be. But if you constantly get interrupted to work on other things, perhaps there are production incidents, or perhaps that you've got people spread across multiple projects, then or multiple products, then that team isn't going to be very effective, and so that's going to show up in some ability to innovate measures. And so some measures that you might see in these different key value areas under ability to innovate might be the number of times that people get interrupted. It might be the number of different products that people are working on. It might be the other things that measure effectiveness, like the skills of the team. Do they have all the right skills, or are they constantly waiting on someone else to come in and help them? Perhaps they don't have skills in security or some other specialized area. So these four different, as I said, you can think of these as like lenses that help you focus on different parts of the problem. So you wouldn't want to just focus on, let's say, the unrealized value piece all the time, because what you might find is that your team isn't very effective at delivering value, and they need to focus on ability to innovate to remove some of those impediments, basically. Or they might need to focus on their time to market so they can get faster feedback on ideas. And so in working with organizations, we find that an organization that has a nice balance between these four different areas is usually a better performing organization than one that maybe focuses on just one of them exclusively. One final thought on this is that a lot of times we find organizations think that the reason why they want to be agile is to become more efficient, or to go faster. So go faster would be part of the time to market key value area, but an ability to innovate would focus on their efficiency and effectiveness. But if they're never measuring the value that they deliver to customers, how do they know that the work that they're doing is actually useful? It might be that they're simply getting more efficient and faster at delivering things that have very little value. So we like to see a balance between these four different areas. And with that, I'll let you can translate.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gert. Ok, bien, lo que Gert nos dice acerca de esta lámina es lo siguiente, ¿no? La idea de los objetivos es que vimos hace un momento, es fácil de entender, es muy intuitiva. Lo que intentamos lograr con EBM, ¿no es cierto?, en estas 4 áreas es verlos como lentes de diferentes partes del problema o diferentes perspectivas del problema. Valor en la parte superior, valor actual y valor no realizado, y capacidades para entregar valor en la parte inferior. El concepto de valor no realizado es básicamente una oportunidad de negocio. El espacio que los clientes tienen entre lo que pueden hacer hoy y lo que quieren hacer en el futuro. Y que es algo que se tiene que cerrar en el tiempo. Hacerlo más pequeño, con incrementos de producto en términos de Scrum. El valor actual, el valor no realizado es importante para comparar en qué producto tenemos que trabajar, ¿no? ¿Qué oportunidades de mercado tenemos? Y esto puede llevar al portafolio. Bueno, y el valor actual es el valor que estamos brindando a los clientes con el producto que tenemos en el mercado. También tenemos el área de time to market, que es fácil de entender. Es cuánto tiempo lleva a medir el tiempo para saber si entregamos beneficio o no con una idea. La habilidad para innovar, cuán efectivos somos entregando valor. Supongamos que tenemos un cycle time bueno, pero podemos ser interrumpidos frecuentemente por errores. Las métricas de habilidad para innovar, como por ejemplo el número de interrupciones, van a afectar este cycle time. En la habilidad para innovar se miden interrupciones, el número de productos o versiones, skill del equipo, que, por ejemplo, están constantemente esperando por otras áreas o por otros especialistas. Estas áreas, las 4 áreas, se enfocan en diferentes vistas del producto. Si no se entrega valor, a veces tenemos que enfocarnos en habilidad para innovar o time to market. Depende. Una organización debe tener un balance en términos de estas 4 áreas. Si una empresa quiere adoptar la agilidad solamente para conseguir eficiencia, se puede enfocar en la performance. Probablemente puede enfocarse solamente en time to market o habilidad para innovar, para ir más rápido, entregar más rápido, pero eso no ayuda a asegurar que estamos entregando cosas con valor. Por lo tanto, una empresa que usa EBM debe tener un balance entre las 4 áreas y no enfocarse solamente en alguna de ellas. ¿Ok, Kurt?
Okay, so that gives you an idea of the basic concepts behind evidence-based management. What we're trying to do is refocus the organization seeking to be agile, trying to get them to refocus on value, refocus on their goals, and then use these different key value areas as ways to inspect and adapt their progress towards those goals. So there, as Joel mentioned earlier, we have a book that's out now. There's a guide to EBM that's free for download on scrum.org. So there's a lot more information there. But I thought I'd give you the basic ideas, and then we can turn it now over to questions.
Ok, Kurt. Bien, la última parte. Bueno, lo que estamos entonces tratando de hacer es cambiar el foco para enfocarnos en la discusión de valor, la discusión sobre objetivos que entreguen valor y fomentar la inspección y adaptación saludable. ¿Ok? Y cambiar el foco de solamente entregar cosas sin no necesariamente entregar valor. Bien, Kurt, tengo una pregunta para Kurt. Kurt, maybe this is something basic. Voy a hacer la pregunta en español. De repente esto es algo básico, pero quisiera que podamos tener más claro la diferencia entre outcome y output, o resultado, entrega, valor y salida, que a veces se confunde. Kurt, maybe this is something basic, but maybe you can clarify with more example what is the difference between outcome and output. People
Okay.
usually have some confusions around that.
Yeah. I wrote a blog several years ago about the title of the blog is OKRs: the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it uses the concepts of activity, output, and outcome to illustrate how you can basically make your goals better. So a goal that's focused on activity basically just says we want to perform these tasks. And so if you set a goal and tell people, we want you to perform these tasks, essentially you're removing their ability to self-organize, to use their knowledge and experience to achieve a better kind of result. In the sense you're saying, I know what's best, and I'm going to simply tell you what to do. So that's activity-based goals. Output-based goals are ones that are focused on producing something. So the goal might be to install a new application, or to produce a report, or to go and research customers. And the problem with output-based goals is that they often lack a why. Why are you trying to produce? Why do you want to produce that thing? And if you keep asking why on activity-based goals and output-based goals, you'll ultimately come to outcomes that you want to achieve. Sometimes you want to achieve an outcome for the organization, like you'd like to increase the amount of revenue the organization makes. That's not really a very good goal, because, well, how are you going to achieve that goal of increasing revenue? So ultimately, we find that goals are much better if you state them in terms of outcomes that you'd like to achieve for customers. That, in other words, you believe that if we achieve this outcome, then customers will buy more product, or they'll use more of your services, and that will produce something that you want the organization to achieve. So outcome-based goals are focused on that satisfaction gap that I mentioned earlier in the first part of the talk. There's some difference between where a customer is today and what they'd like to achieve, and by providing them with outcomes, you help to close that gap. So you enable them to do something new that they couldn't do before, or you enable them to do something better than they were able to do it before, and that's an outcome. So if you think about these activities, outputs, and outcomes, we want to try to get to outcome-based goals. And then that fourth kind of thing I didn't really talk about too much, but that increasing revenue for the organization or increasing profitability, that's an impact. But impacts are only achieved by in our view, by achieving outcomes for customers. So anyway, those really three different things: activity, output, and outcome are really important concepts.
Okay, thanks, Gerd. Bien. La pregunta era, ¿cuál es una diferencia, cuál es la diferencia entre outcome y output? A veces hay una confusión y se tiende a crear objetivos tipo output, y es difícil hacer objetivos tipo outcome. Bueno, Gerd nos dice que él escribió un blog sobre OKRs hace un tiempo, lo bueno, lo malo y lo feo. Y ahí Gerd habla de tres tipos de objetivos: activity, output y outcome. Actividades, salidas y resultados. Okay. Entonces, un ejemplo de un objetivo de tipo activity es definir objetivos como las cosas que queremos hacer, las tareas que se quieren hacer, Y ese tipo de objetivos de definir las tareas que se quieren hacer reduce la posibilidad de lograr mejores resultados, porque básicamente estamos diciendo que ya sabemos lo que es bueno y por lo tanto no hay que buscar algo adicional, ¿no? Reduce la posibilidad de buscar mejores resultados. El output es producir algo. Podría ser instalar una aplicación, producir un reporte, investigar a clientes. El problema es que los outputs frecuentemente pierden el porqué, la razón por la cual hay que producir eso. Nosotros podríamos encontrar, a partir de las activities y los outputs, o las actividades y las salidas, podríamos continuar preguntándonos por qué, y entonces vamos a llegar al outcome. Un ejemplo: aumentar la rentabilidad de la empresa no es un buen objetivo, porque no dice cómo lograrlo en términos del cliente, porque no refleja outcome del cliente. Si logramos un objetivo, se puede conseguir mejores resultados en el cliente. Los outcomes se enfocan en reducir la brecha de satisfacción. Cuando habilitamos a los clientes para que puedan hacer algo nuevo que no podían hacer, reducimos la brecha de satisfacción. Si pensamos en estos tipos de objetivos, activity, output y outcome, actividades, salidas y resultados para el cliente, vamos a encontrar que incrementar, por ejemplo, la rentabilidad es impacto para la empresa. Pero este impacto solamente se puede lograr con outcomes para los clientes, y es donde debemos empezar. ¿Verdad? Ok. Tengo otra pregunta para Kurt, ¿no? ¿Cuál es el peligro de una empresa de enfocarse mucho en el valor actual? Es decir, una empresa quiere conseguir mayor rentabilidad, mayores ventas, tener clientes satisfechos con el producto actual y se enfoca mucho en el valor actual, como ejemplo, ¿no? ¿Cuál es el riesgo de enfocarse mucho en el valor actual? ¿En qué momento una empresa debería darse cuenta que probablemente debería enfocarse en otra área de valor? Kurt, I have a question. What could be the risk if a company is focused on only current value, maybe trying to increase revenue, reduce cost, increase customer satisfaction, and trying to get more of this area, only on this area, current value? What could be the risk if the company does that?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, that having a balance between these four different areas helps you to make sure that you're not undercutting perhaps your future ability to deliver value. So in the short run, you might be able to increase time to market by cutting corners on quality, or you might be able to temporarily deliver more value, more current value by, let's say, focusing on some much needed features. But if you don't focus on ability to innovate, then over time you might affect the overall quality of the product. And so ultimately current value might start declining because you have less happy employees, or because those employees aren't being as effective. So you start seeing your costs go up because you're not being very efficient or effective. So focusing only on one of these, and current value is a good one to pick, might ultimately hurt the other four areas in some significant ways. And I noticed also that there was a question in the chat about OKR, so I want to make sure we get to that, but I'll let you translate what I just said, and then maybe we can talk about OKR since I mentioned that before.
Okay. Tener un balance entre las áreas es vital. En el corto plazo se podría incrementar mejorar el time to market o la calidad, la habilidad para innovar, para entregar más valor, enfocándonos en features que son necesarios. Pero si si nos enfocamos en solamente, por ejemplo, un área, podríamos perder la calidad, lo cual puede ayudar a aumentar el costo en el futuro. Entonces, enfocarse en una sola área siempre puede traer riesgos. Ok, Kurt, déjame un momento para entrar a la pregunta. Let me go to the question. A ver, un momento. Un momento para ver la pregunta. Oh.
So should I talk about the OKR and EBM combination?
Yes, please, because I don't see that.
So Carlos has asked the question, could you explain to us why it is important to combine OKRs and EBM? So I mentioned earlier that we found that organizations struggle to form effective goals, and many times those goals are focused on activities and outputs. And when I've worked with organizations who are using the OKR technique, the objectives and key results technique, they often fall into this trap where they have activity-based objectives, and the key results are mostly stated in terms of, that some particular activity is performed or some particular output is produced. And if you ask, in those situations, if you ask, why do you want to produce that activity, that output, or why do you want to perform that activity, you get to a better goal. And so stating that the objectives in OKR terms, in terms of outcomes, really helps to strengthen the technique. So I think the OKR technique provides a template for your goals, and it reminds you that you have to measure that whether you're achieving those goals through that key results piece. So it's a fine technique, but adding the notions from EBM around outcomes ends up being very important. And also thinking about these four key value areas might also help you to form more short to intermediate term goals that help you to improve your ability to innovate and time to market. So I think of EBM as, in a sense, a larger framework that provides kind of a structure in which you can use the OKR technique more effectively.
Carlos preguntaba por qué es importante o la relación entre los OKRs y bien, por qué es importante combinarlos. Bueno, Kerr dice que las empresas frecuentemente luchan por formar buenos objetivos, ¿no? Y algunas de estas empresas usan los OKRs como una forma de medir. Cuando lo hacen, frecuentemente caen en objetivos de tipo actividades o de outputs. Y entonces los key results, que son las métricas, tienden a ser métricas de rendimiento, de actividades o de salidas, pero no de outcome. Y si nos preguntáramos por qué sucede esto, vamos a encontrar que pues estos objetivos no se han definido en términos de outcome, ¿no? Entonces EBM realmente ayuda a las técnicas de los OKRs, ¿no? Los objetivos dan sentido a los key results, ¿no? Y en EBM tenemos definidos estos objetivos y nos basamos en outcomes. Entonces los OKRs son una buena técnica y EBM puede ayudar a los objetivos, ayudar a definir los objetivos son los OKRs, y también las cuatro áreas pueden proveer un marco de referencia como una estructura para que los OKRs sean mucho más objetivos. Es decir, tratar de usar EBM con OKRs provee un beneficio mayor. Bien, a ver si hay alguna otra pregunta. Okay, Kerr, we're getting to the end of the session, and I have a last question. That there is a comment in the comment box.
Yeah.
Dice, por ejemplo, al parecer, Diego Pérez dice, al parecer siguen confundiendo la diferencia entre output y outcome, pero esto no es lo peor. Lo grave es que lo hacen mediante afirmaciones del tipo outcome reduce la brecha de satisfacción. Esta frase evidencia la confusión que tienen y que por desgracia la instalan. Gracias, Diego. Diego Pérez is confirming that there is usually there is a misunderstanding of the output and the outcome. And there is usually the idea that the output, la salida, the output reduces the satisfaction gap. Yeah, but that's okay. There is a last question, Kurt. Hay una última pregunta. Dice, ¿cómo podríamos recomendar introducir EBM en las compañías o al product owner que nunca escucharon hablar acerca de eso? ¿Cuál podría ser el primer paso o enfoque para ello, ¿no? Y si hay alguna contraindicación. Kurt, there is a question from Inga about how to recommendation to introduce EBM to a company or a product owner. Okay, please you can answer the question.
Yeah. We cover this a lot in the book, so I'll just say I think we get the booklet. Reading the book would answer a lot of that particular question. But the first thing that I like to start with is to look at the goals. So whether they're using OKRs or not, if they are, then maybe they have some goals. But the first thing would be to try to understand what are they trying to achieve, usually with an agile transformation, but it could be, you could simply start with a product and say, well, what are you trying to achieve with the product? Help them to improve the product goal, and then look at what sort of things they can do in the next sprint to try to seek toward that product goal. So then you help them use the concepts of EBM to help them form better sprint goals, and then start seeking toward the product goal, which is usually a kind of an intermediate goal in the terms that I mentioned earlier. So start with goals, then look at, in a sense, the experiment loop, which if you're using Scrum, it would be the sprint itself, and try to help form better short-term tactical goals and then work toward the intermediate goals. So it's always start with goals. Otherwise, you don't know why you're improving. But you might find that the team has to work on some of the ability to innovate. So then maybe they're stuck. They haven't been very effective at delivering. For example, if they're not getting to done and not able to deliver a product increment, you'd want to focus on that first. If they have very poor time to market, and perhaps takes them several months to get feedback, you might want to improve that before you start focusing on some of the more current value, unrealized value type of goals. So there's some heuristics that we mentioned in the book that you might find valuable.
Ok, Carl. Bien, había una pregunta, ¿cómo empezamos el uso, la introducción de EBM? ¿Cómo introducimos EBM a un programmer que nunca había escuchado hablar de eso, ¿no? Bien, Kerr nos menciona acerca de su libro, el libro que has mencionado, cubre parte de estas recomendaciones. La primera cosa que Kerr recomienda es que hay que empezar con los objetivos estratégicos, intermedios y tácticos, ¿no? Pensar en un objetivo estratégico como outcome, como lo hemos mencionado. Al margen de si se usan OKRs o no, pensar primero en objetivos, ¿no? Responder con los objetivos, qué es lo que buscan lograr con la transformación ágil y qué pueden hacer para mejorar con el producto hacia los objetivos del producto y hacia el objetivo estratégico. Y formar mejores sprint goals, ¿no? Usar EBM para ayudar en esto con los objetivos que hemos mencionado. Y usar Scrum con los sprint como experimentos para lograr que estos objetivos tácticos nos lleven hacia los objetivos intermedios. Entonces, siempre empezar con objetivos, si no, no sabemos por qué mejoramos. Otro ejemplo de cómo usarlo es, por ejemplo, en una situación, si nosotros no llegamos a entregar un incremento de producto, enfocarse primero en tratar de entregar incremento de producto, enfocarse en la habilidad para innovar. Y si no estamos recibiendo feedback del cliente por un tiempo largo, probablemente meses, entonces enfocarse en time to market para poder mejorar. Pero siempre balancear las 4 áreas pensando en entregar valor actual y valor no realizado en el futuro. Bien, Kerr, llegamos a la parte final. Gracias por su participación. Nos pueden escribir si alguien tiene alguna consulta, comentario para alguna charla posterior. Bien, quiero darle nuevamente las gracias a Kerr. Gracias a los que nos han seguido y gracias a Kerr por acompañarnos nuevamente. Kerr, thank you very, very much for your participation. It was a great time with you talking about EBM, and maybe we are going to have another webinar with you talking about EBM or Agile, Scrum, many things. Thank you very much, Kerr.
There were a couple of questions that were in the chat. If you want to conclude the session now, I'd be happy to follow up maybe on email with a couple of those if you've got emails for people. Or we can, I can keep going and answer a few of the questions quickly too, if you like.
Tienes no las veo. Ah, hay una pregunta de Carlos, dice, ¿no? ¿Cómo implementar EBM en empresas pequeñas? Esa es la pregunta de Carlos. Sí, es la pregunta que falta. Carl, please continue. You can answer the Carlos question.
Yeah,
sí.
Yeah, of course. So one of the questions is there a positive aspect to using Kanban metrics with EBM and why? So yes, EBM doesn't prescribe a set of metrics. It provides more of a way of thinking about the measures. And so Kanban metrics focus basically on things, excuse me, focus on things that are causing waste in the organization and that are reducing, that are lengthening cycle time. So in EBM terms, that would be focusing on ability to innovate and time to market. So too much work in process, good example. That's a good example of an ability to innovate kind of metric. The overall cycle time or various other parts of cycle time would be time to market measures. So the Kanban metrics can be very informative about those organizational capability kinds of key value areas, but they don't tell you very much about the value that you're delivering. So combining the Kanban measures with more measures of unrealized value and current value would give you a more complete picture on whether what you're doing is useful. Otherwise, there is a danger with Kanban that you're simply optimizing your ability to produce waste if you don't know whether the things that you're producing are valuable. So that's one thought there. And then so I will pause and you can translate that for people who might need that. And then we'll talk about the last question on how to implement EBM in small companies.
Ok. Bueno, sobre la métrica de Kanban en EBM, Kurt nos dice que las métricas de Kanban se enfocan básicamente en reducir el cycle time. En términos de EBM, esto podría ser enfocarse en las áreas de habilidad para innovar y time to market. Por ejemplo, mejorar el proceso, ¿no? Las métricas de Kanban dan información sobre las capacidades de la organización para entregar valor, pero no te dan información sobre valor. Y esto es un riesgo porque podríamos enfocarnos solamente en reducir el desperdicio, ¿no? Es un riesgo. La recomendación es que usen las 4 áreas para reducir este riesgo. Bien, Kurt, do you see another question? Maybe if you want to answer.
Yeah, so the other question was pieces of advice on how to implement EBM in small companies. And it's very similar to what the answer to Inga's question is, that start by looking at goals, try to understand the longer term goals for that small company. They usually have a vision or a mission statement that can be mapped into a strategic goal. Look at intermediate goals, which would be more product level goals or sort of 3 to 6 months goals that the organization has. It might be achieving some kind of funding milestone or funding kind of event, or might be producing a minimum viable product for a particular market. And then the shorter term goals typically align with the shorter term sprint goals. They started to measure, you mentioned earlier, or we talked about earlier, the Kanban goals. So you might want to understand what's that organization's time to market? How long does it take them to deliver? What kind of things might they need to do in addition to delivering value to customers in order to improve their ability to deliver? Are they spread too thin? Do they have the right skills they need? Those would be more ability to innovate measures. So it's much the same in any size organization, but it's in a sense easier with a small company because you might only have one product and one team or a small number of teams. And so it's maybe easier to get the information and easier to focus on certain kinds of improvements. So much the same.
Okay. Carlos hizo la pregunta, y bien, Small Companies. Bueno, la recomendación de Kurt es siempre empezar con mirar los objetivos a largo plazo, el objetivo estratégico, objetivos intermedios más asociados probablemente al producto, al objetivo del producto, y que busca algún tipo de evento que se logre como un MVP, ¿no? Un MVP, lanzar un producto mínimo viable. Y luego el objetivo de corto plazo, como el objetivo del sprint. Recomiendo también que la empresa pueda mirar el cuánto demora o cuánto se necesita demorar para entregar valor, ¿no? El time to market. Y entonces mejorar el time to market para entregar valor. O también los skills necesarios, enfocarse en el área de habilidad para innovar. Finalmente, que es más fácil introducir EBM en las empresas pequeñas porque pues tenemos realmente un equipo Scrum, pocos equipos Scrum, es más fácil conseguir la información y es más fácil enfocarse en ciertas mejoras. Pero voy a resaltar la recomendación inicial que siempre es enfocarse en los objetivos que hemos definido, ¿no? El estratégico, el intermedio y el táctico. Bien, bueno, ahora sí, creo que vamos a cerrar la sesión. Si hay alguna pregunta adicional, nos las pueden enviar o a Kurt y podemos seguir la conversación. Bien, finalmente, gracias Carlos por las preguntas. Gracias Paolo, gracias Inga, gracias Diego. Y gracias a todos los que han participado de esta reunión. Y gracias a Kurt. Well, Kurt, finally, this is the end of the session. Thank you
Yeah.
for with us. And see you next time.
And that last question from Carlos about case studies, we have a lot of case studies in webinar form and in other reports on the Scrum.org website, so you can look there. And then the book that Yola mentioned at the beginning, Unlocking Business Agility, was EBM. It's organized around a lot of different case studies. We've anonymized the companies for various reasons, because we're usually talking about various problems that they have and how an EBM approach helps them to solve that. So the book itself is organized around a lot of case studies as well. So anyway, I thank you for attending, and I hope you found this interesting. And if you have any feedback after you've read the book or looked at some of the materials, we're always happy to hear that. So thanks very much.
Gracias, Carlos. En la página de Scrum.org hay varios casos de estudio. Y bueno, Kerr menciona que el libro yo lo tengo, se basa en varios casos de estudio también. Pueden encontrar la información en el libro. Y bueno, creo que esto queda para otra sesión adicional, así que síganos en nuestra página de LinkedIn. Pronto publicaremos otro evento y parece que esto va a tener una segunda parte. Gracias, Kier. Gracias a todos. Nos vemos. Hasta pronto. Gracias.